The sun blazed down mercilessly on the Coronado Beach training grounds as Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his gear for what would become the most defining moment of his military career. The sand beneath his boots felt like concrete after hours of relentless drills, and sweat stung his eyes as he watched his fellow trainees struggle through another punishing exercise. Marcus had been through 12 weeks of basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, known simply as BUD/S among the elite warriors who survived its brutal curriculum. Every day brought new challenges designed to break the weak and forge the strong into America's most lethal fighting force. The dropout rate hovered around 80%, and Marcus had watched dozens of good men ring the brass bell that signaled their surrender. On this particular Tuesday morning, the instructors had divided the remaining 37 trainees into small groups for combat simulation exercises. These weren't ordinary drills, they were designed to test every aspect of a SEAL's training under extreme stress. The scenario involved rescuing a captured teammate from an enemy compound, requiring precision, teamwork, and split-second decision-making. Marcus found himself paired with Jake Thompson, a cocky former college football player from Texas who had made enemies among both instructors and fellow trainees. Jake's arrogance had earned him extra punishment runs and countless push-ups, but he refused to humble himself. His attitude created tension within their unit, something that could prove deadly in real combat situations. The drill began at 0800 hours with their team infiltrating a mock enemy base constructed from shipping containers and wooden barriers. Marcus moved silently through the maze of obstacles, his M4 rifle at the ready, every sense heightened by months of intensive training. The realistic nature of these exercises never ceased to amaze him. Blank ammunition, smoke grenades, and actors playing enemy combatants created an environment that closely mimicked actual warfare. As they approached the target building where their captured teammate waited, Marcus heard shouting from behind a concrete barrier. His blood ran cold as he recognized Jake's voice, but this wasn't part of the exercise. The tone carried genuine fear and pain, emotions that had no place in a training scenario. Marcus quickly signaled to his team leader and moved toward the sound, abandoning the planned route. What he discovered behind that barrier would haunt him for years to come. Jake lay on the ground, curled in a defensive position, while Instructor Petty Officer First Class Derek Sullivan stood over him, delivering vicious kicks to his ribs and back. Sullivan was known throughout the SEAL community as a decorated veteran with 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan. His reputation for toughness was legendary, but what Marcus witnessed crossed every line of acceptable training methods. This wasn't the controlled aggression used to build mental toughness, this was savage brutality that could seriously injure or kill a trainee. Jake's protective gear had been removed, leaving him vulnerable to the steel-toed boots that connected with bone-jarring force. Blood trickled from his nose and mouth, and his breathing came in ragged gasps between impacts. Sullivan's face showed no emotion as he continued the assault, as if Jake were nothing more than a training dummy. The other trainees in Marcus's group had frozen in shock, uncertain how to respond to a situation that fell completely outside their training protocols. Intervening against a superior officer was grounds for immediate dismissal from the program, court-martial, and the end of any military career. Yet standing by while witnessing what appeared to be attempted murder violated everything the SEALs stood for. Marcus felt time slow to a crawl as his mind raced through options. His father had been a Marine who taught him that true courage meant doing what was right regardless of personal consequences. His younger sister had joined the army partly because of stories Marcus shared about military honor and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Every principle that had driven him to seek the ultimate challenge of SEAL training now demanded action. Sullivan raised his boot for another devastating blow to Jake's head, an impact that could cause permanent brain damage or death. In that frozen moment, Marcus made a choice that would alter the trajectory of multiple lives. He stepped forward, knowing that his actions would likely end his SEAL aspirations but unable to live with himself if he remained silent. The weight of that decision pressed down on him as he prepared to confront one of the Navy's most respected combat veterans. Everything he had worked for, every sacrifice made during months of grueling training, hung in the balance. Yet Marcus understood that some things mattered more than personal ambition, and saving a fellow warrior's life was one of them. Marcus stepped into the open space between Sullivan and Jake, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it over the distant sound of training exercises. The instructor's boot stopped mid-swing, and his cold blue eyes locked onto Marcus with the intensity of a predator sizing out potential prey. For a moment, neither man moved, the tension crackling between them like electricity before a lightning strike. "Step back, Rodriguez," Sullivan commanded, his voice carrying the authority of years in command positions. "This doesn't concern you." Marcus stood his ground, acutely aware that every word he spoke could determine not only his future but Jake's survival. "Sir, with respect, this trainee requires medical attention. The exercise parameters don't include this level of physical punishment." Sullivan's face darkened, and he took a step closer to Marcus, close enough that Marcus could see the network of scars that mapped the instructor's combat history. "You think you understand the parameters, trainee? You think you know what it takes to forge a warrior capable of protecting American lives?" The other members of Marcus's team remained frozen, their faces masks of confusion and fear. They had trained for every conceivable combat scenario, but nothing in their preparation had equipped them for confronting a superior officer engaged in what appeared to be criminal assault. The military hierarchy that governed their every action had suddenly become a trap with no clear escape route. Jake groaned from his position on the ground, blood pooling beneath his face. His breathing had become shallow and irregular, signs that Marcus recognized from combat medical training as potential indicators of internal injuries. Time was running out, and Sullivan showed no signs of backing down from his assault. "Sir, I request permission to call for medical assistance," Marcus said, trying to maintain military protocol even as his instincts screamed at him to physically intervene. "This trainee's injuries appear serious enough to require immediate evaluation." Sullivan laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "Medical assistance? You soft-hearted recruits don't understand that war doesn't come with medical timeouts. The enemy won't stop shooting because someone gets hurt. This is exactly why most of you will never earn the Trident." The Trident, the coveted badge that marked a fully qualified Navy SEAL, represented everything Marcus had dreamed of achieving since deciding to pursue the most challenging path the military offered. Earning it meant joining an elite brotherhood of warriors whose reputation for excellence was unmatched in the special operations community. Losing the chance to earn it felt like losing a part of his identity. But, as Marcus looked down at Jake's battered form, he realized that some prices were too high to pay, even for his deepest dreams. Jake had been arrogant and difficult, true, but he was still a fellow American who had volunteered to serve his country. No training exercise, no matter how realistic, justified this level of brutality. Sullivan seemed to read Marcus's thoughts, and his expression shifted to one of calculating coldness. "I see what you're thinking, Rodriguez. You're weighing your career against this worthless piece of trash. Here's what's going to happen: you're going to turn around, rejoin your team, and complete this exercise." What happened here never occurred. The offer hung in the air between them, a lifeline that would preserve Marcus's SEAL aspirations while abandoning Jake to whatever fate Sullivan had planned. Marcus understood that accepting this deal would compromise everything he believed about honor, duty, and the sacred responsibility to protect fellow warriors. Yet refusing it meant sacrificing years of preparation and training. Marcus glanced at his teammates, seeing his own internal struggle reflected in their faces. They all wanted to help, but the military justice system was notoriously harsh on those who challenged the chain of command. A single wrong move could destroy multiple careers and futures. Jake stirred slightly, his eyes opening to focus on Marcus with an expression of desperate hope. In that moment, Marcus saw not the arrogant athlete who had caused problems throughout training, but a young man far from home who had volunteered to serve something greater than himself. Jake's family probably had no idea their son was lying broken on a training ground, and they trusted the Navy to return him safely. Sullivan raised his boot again, positioning it over Jake's head with deliberate menace. "Last chance, Rodriguez. Walk away, or join him." Marcus felt something crystallize inside him, a moment of absolute clarity that cut through all the fear and uncertainty. He had joined the military to protect people, to stand against those who would harm the innocent and defenseless. If he couldn't fulfill that mission here, on American soil, among his own brothers in arms, then the Trident would be nothing more than a meaningless piece of metal. "Sir, I cannot and will not stand down," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. I'm prepared to face whatever consequences result from this decision, but I will not allow you to continue this assault." Sullivan's face twisted with rage, and Marcus realized that his refusal to comply had pushed the unstable instructor past any rational response. The next few seconds would determine whether Marcus had saved one life or simply ensured that 2 trainees would require medical attention. Sullivan's boot never reached its target. Instead, he lunged forward with his fists, launching himself at Marcus with the fury of a man whose authority had been challenged beyond his tolerance. Years of combat experience guided Sullivan's movements as he threw a devastating right hook aimed at Marcus's jaw, intending to end the confrontation with overwhelming force. Marcus had anticipated this response. His own combat training kicked in automatically, muscle memory from countless hours of hand-to-hand combat instruction taking control. He deflected Sullivan's punch with his left forearm while stepping to the side, using the instructor's momentum against him. The move was textbook perfect, exactly as taught in their defensive tactics courses. But Sullivan was no ordinary opponent. His combat experience far exceeded anything Marcus had encountered in training, and he recovered from the failed attack with frightening speed. He spun around and grabbed Marcus by the shirt, using his superior weight and strength to drive him backward toward the concrete barrier. The impact drove the air from Marcus's lungs, but he managed to break Sullivan's grip and create enough space to reassess the situation. Around them, the other trainees had finally overcome their shock and were moving to intervene, though their faces showed they understood the career-ending implications of their actions. "All of you stop right there." The commanding voice cut through the chaos like a blade, freezing everyone in place. Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel Torres emerged from behind the training structure, his weathered face dark with anger as he took in the scene. Torres was a legend in the SEAL community, a man whose reputation for fairness and integrity was matched only by his tactical brilliance. Torres moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command, his eyes taking in every detail of the situation in seconds. Jake still lay motionless on the ground, blood staining the sand around him. Sullivan stood in a fighting stance, his uniform torn and his face flushed with rage. Marcus remained backed against the barrier, clearly defensive but unbroken. "What in the hell is going on here?" Torres demanded, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in the Navy. "This is supposed to be a training exercise, not a street fight." Sullivan straightened immediately, falling into the rigid posture of a subordinate addressing a superior officer. "Sir, Trainee Rodriguez interfered with corrective action being administered to Trainee Thompson. When ordered to stand down, he became aggressive and attacked me." Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized Sullivan was attempting to completely reverse the narrative of events. In the military justice system, the word of a decorated instructor would carry enormous weight against that of a trainee, especially one who had allegedly assaulted a superior officer. "Is that your version of events, Rodriguez?" Torres asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp as they studied Marcus's face. Marcus understood that this moment would define not only his own future but potentially set a precedent for how such situations would be handled throughout the SEAL program. If he remained silent or accepted Sullivan's version of events, other instructors might feel emboldened to cross similar lines. Future trainees could suffer worse abuse, knowing that the system would protect their abusers. "No, Master Chief, that is not accurate," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I observed Instructor Sullivan delivering what appeared to be excessive physical punishment to Trainee Thompson outside the parameters of any training exercise. When I requested medical assistance for Thompson, Sullivan threatened both of us and attempted to assault me." Torres looked around at the other trainees, his experienced eyes reading the tension and fear in their faces. "Anyone else witness these events?" The silence stretched for long seconds as each trainee wrestled with the same impossible choice Marcus had faced. Speaking up meant potential career suicide, but remaining silent made them complicit in covering up serious misconduct. Finally, Trainee Michael Chen stepped forward. "Master Chief, I witnessed the entire incident. Rodriguez's account is accurate. Instructor Sullivan was beating Thompson severely, and Rodriguez attempted to intervene through proper channels before any physical confrontation occurred." One by one, the other trainees confirmed Marcus's version of events, their voices growing stronger as they realized they were supporting truth rather than hierarchy. Each statement was another nail in Sullivan's career coffin, but also another validation that the values they had been taught about honor and integrity still meant something. Torres knelt beside Jake, checking his pulse and examining his injuries with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen too much combat trauma.
Thompson needs immediate medical attention.
Rodriguez, escort him to the medical facility and remain with him until you're dismissed. The rest of you will continue with the scheduled exercise under Instructor Williams. As the medical team arrived and carefully loaded Jake onto a stretcher, Torres turned his attention back to Sullivan, whose confident demeanor had evaporated as the reality of his situation became clear. The instructor who had seemed so powerful and intimidating just minutes before now appeared small and defeated. "You and I will discuss this matter in my office immediately," Torres told Sullivan, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And, Sullivan, you're relieved of all training duties pending investigation." Marcus watched as Sullivan was led away, understanding that while justice was being served, the ripple effects of this incident would extend far beyond the immediate participants. The SEAL program would face scrutiny, policy changes would be implemented, and every instructor would be reminded that their authority came with corresponding responsibility. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in the base medical facility beside Jake's hospital bed, watching his fellow trainees slowly recover from injuries that had been far more severe than anyone initially realized. Jake had suffered 2 broken ribs, a concussion, and internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. The doctors confirmed that without immediate medical intervention, Jake could have died from his injuries. The official investigation had moved swiftly once Torres filed his report. Sullivan faced court-martial proceedings for assault, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical records, witness testimony, and Sullivan's own admissions during questioning painted a clear picture of systematic abuse that had escalated beyond any reasonable training standards.
During the investigation, other incidents came to light.
Former trainees contacted the Navy to report similar experiences with Sullivan, describing a pattern of excessive punishment that had been covered up or dismissed as tough training. Marcus realized that his intervention had prevented not just Jake's serious injury, but potentially saved future trainees from similar abuse. Jake turned toward Marcus as he stirred from his afternoon nap, his face still bearing the faded bruises from Sullivan's assault.
"You know, you probably saved my life," he said quietly. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in."
Marcus shrugged uncomfortably, still processing the enormity of what had occurred.
"Any of us would have done the same thing."
"We're supposed to protect each other, not watch each other get destroyed." "But I wasn't exactly the most popular guy in our class," Jake admitted, his voice carrying a new humility that his injuries had taught him.
"I know I was arrogant and difficult. Most people would have been happy to see me get knocked down a few pegs."
The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Chief Torres, who had become a regular visitor during Jake's recovery. His presence commanded instant respect, but Marcus had learned that beneath his stern exterior lay a man deeply committed to the welfare of every sailor under his command.
"How are you feeling today, Thompson?"
Torres asked, checking Jake's chart with the efficiency of someone who had visited many wounded warriors over the years.
"Much better, Master Chief.
The doctors say I can probably return to limited duty next week, though I'll be recycled to a later training class."
Torres nodded approvingly. "That's good news."
"Rodriguez, I wanted to update you on the investigation findings. Sullivan has been found guilty on all charges and will be sentenced next month. He's also been permanently barred from any training or instructional duties." The news brought Marcus a sense of closure, but he remained concerned about the broader implications.
"Master Chief, will this affect the entire SEAL program? I know there's been a lot of scrutiny since the incident."
"Actually, the opposite has occurred," Torres replied, settling into a chair beside the bed.
"The Navy brass has used this incident as an opportunity to strengthen our training protocols and oversight procedures.
We're implementing new safeguards to ensure this type of abuse never happens again, while maintaining the high standards that make SEALs effective." Torres pulled out an official-looking document and handed it to Marcus. "In fact, your actions have been recognized at the highest levels. You're being awarded the Navy Achievement Medal for exceptional courage and integrity in protecting a fellow service member." Marcus stared at the commendation letter, hardly believing what he was reading. Far from ending his SEAL aspirations, his intervention had earned him official recognition and praise from Navy leadership. The medal citation specifically mentioned his unwavering commitment to core Navy values in the face of personal risk. "Sir, I was certain that confronting an instructor would end my career," Marcus admitted. "I thought I was choosing between doing the right thing and achieving my goals." Torres smiled, the first time Marcus had seen such an expression on the Master Chief's normally stern face. "Son, the right thing and your goals aren't mutually exclusive. What you did demonstrates exactly the kind of character we want in Navy SEALs. Someone who will risk everything to protect his teammates is someone we can trust with the most dangerous and important missions." Jake extended his hand toward Marcus, his grip firm despite his recent injuries. "I owe you more than I can ever repay. But I want you to know that watching you stand up like that changed how I think about leadership and courage." 6 months later, Marcus completed his SEAL training and earned his trident, graduating near the top of his class. Jake, after recovering fully from his injuries, also successfully completed the program in a later class, having learned valuable lessons about humility and teamwork during his recovery period. The incident had indeed changed the SEAL training program, but in positive ways that strengthened rather than weakened it. New oversight procedures ensured that instructors faced regular evaluation and that trainees had clear channels for reporting abuse. The culture shifted to emphasize that true toughness came from protecting teammates, not from enduring unnecessary brutality. Marcus went on to serve multiple combat deployments, earning additional decorations for valor and leadership. Throughout his career, he carried the lessons learned from that day on the training ground that moral courage often requires greater strength than physical courage, and that the most important battles are sometimes fought not against foreign enemies, but against the darkness that can exist within any organization. The story of Marcus Rodriguez and his intervention became part of SEAL training folklore, taught to new classes as an example of how individual courage can protect institutional integrity. It served as a reminder that the values of honor, courage, and commitment were not just words on a plaque, but principles worth sacrificing for when tested by real-world challenges. Years later, when Marcus became an instructor himself, he would tell his trainees that earning the trident was just the beginning. The real test of a Navy SEAL came not in how well they could fight enemies, but in how courageously they would stand for what was right, even when the cost seemed unbearable.